Korean billionaire CEO went to buy a wedding gown, then he saw his ex-wife working there with a little girl just beside her. Miho Park, the billionaire CEO, was halfway through boutique when the wedding gown was lifted from the rack. The sales associate handled it carefully, as if weightless things still required respect. The lace caught the light first, subtle, deliberate, the kind of detail meant to reward attention rather than demand it. Everything about the room worked the same way. Soft lighting, muted colors, silence engineered into the walls. This was why Miho had chosen the place. Discretion mattered. No one here rushed. No one stared. No one asked questions they weren't paid to ask. The kind of environment where a man like him could move unnoticed, even though his face appeared regularly in business magazines and financial headlines. "This design is one of our most requested," the associate said gently. "It photographs beautifully without being loud." Miho nodded once. He had already decided to buy. The gown wasn't for him, of course. It was a symbol, a step already approved by his calendar, his advisors, and a version of his life that ran efficiently forward without looking back. A safe errand, an ordinary errand. The associate lifted the gown higher so he could see the detailing along the bodice. And that was when the woman behind the counter looked up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then recognition arrived. Quietly, precisely, like a fault line giving way beneath polished marble. Her eyes met his. Not shock, not disbelief. Just a brief, unguarded pause. Then it disappeared. "Good afternoon," she said evenly. "Are you shopping for a wedding?" Her tone was professional, neutral, perfect. Miho felt the air in the room shift. Behind the counter stood John Kim, his ex-wife, and beside her, partially hidden behind a display of veils, stood a little girl. The child couldn't have been older than 7, maybe 8. Her hair was pulled back neatly, as if someone had taught her early that order mattered. One hand gripped the fabric of John's dress. The other held a sketchbook pressed flat against her chest. Fingers smudged faintly with pencil graphite. She didn't smile. She didn't look away. She studied Miho with calm, unsettling focus. "Yes," Miho said after a moment. "I am." The word felt heavier than it should have. "Congratulations," John replied. No warmth, no bitterness, just accuracy. The associate smiled, relieved the silence had broken. "Would you like to see similar styles, or would you prefer a fitting room?" Miho didn't answer. His attention had narrowed to 2 things. The woman who once knew him better than anyone alive, and the child who watched him like she was solving a problem. "Yama," the girl whispered, tugging gently at John's sleeve. Her voice was soft, but the room carried it easily. "Who is that man?" John's hand moved automatically to the child's shoulder. Protective, familiar. "An old acquaintance," she said, without looking at Miho. "Acquaintance." The word landed with surgical precision. Miho felt something tighten in his chest. John turned back to the counter, already moving, already contained. "Do you have a particular style in mind?" she asked him. The question was polite, procedural. It was also a test. "Simple," Miho said. "Elegant." "Of course." She nodded once. "That will narrow it down." She moved toward another rack, keys at her waist catching the light as she unlocked a glass case. Her movements were practiced, efficient, untouched by whatever history sat between them. Miho watched her hands instead of her face. The child remained still. Miho crouched slightly, lowering himself to her level. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked briefly to John, then back to him. "Sumin," she said. Miho nodded, committing the name to memory, without knowing why. "That's a beautiful sketchbook," he said. "What are you drawing?" She hesitated, then opened it just enough for him to see. Buildings, not childish shapes, not imaginary castles. Real structures, drawn with careful lines and measured proportions. Windows counted. Shadows placed deliberately. Miho felt a strange pressure behind his ribs. "Sumin," John said calmly, without turning. "Why don't you sit at my desk while I help this customer?" Customer. Another boundary. Sumin nodded and walked to the small desk behind the counter, arranging her pencils in a straight line before sitting down. Miho straightened slowly. The diamonds in the display case no longer held his attention. The gown hanging between them felt suddenly exposed. Less a promise, more question. John returned with another dress. "This one is similar," she said. "Less ornate." Miho barely looked at it. "How old is she?" he asked quietly. Before Miho Park became a name that moved markets, he was just another young man trying not to look lost. It was raining the afternoon he met John. Not the dramatic kind of rain that forced people into doorways, but the steady, soaking kind that blurred the edges of the city and made everyone move a little faster. Miho had been walking for nearly an hour, suit jacket folded over his arm, shoes already ruined, when he ducked into a small tea house in Insadong. The place was nearly empty. An old man sat near the window, newspaper folded carefully beside his cup. At the far end of the room, a young woman sat alone at a small table, sketchbook open, pencil moving slowly across the page. Miho chose the table closest to the door. He spread his papers out to dry, heart sinking as he noticed ink bleeding through one of the pages. The rejection letter from earlier that day, his 17th, had smeared into something unreadable. "You're going to lose all of that if you keep moving it around." The voice came from across the room. Miho looked up. The woman with the sketchbook was standing now, holding 2 cups of tea. She placed one in front of him without asking. "You look like you need it more than I do," she said. "I can't take that," Miho replied immediately. "I didn't order." "I know," she said, sitting down anyway. "That's why I brought it." He hesitated, then wrapped his hands around the cup. The warmth felt unexpected, undeserved. "Thank you," he said. She nodded and returned to her seat, opening her sketchbook again. Minutes passed in comfortable silence. Miho tried to focus on salvaging his papers, but his attention kept drifting back to her drawings. They weren't the kind of sketches people usually made of Seoul. No towers, no neon. Instead, she drew alleyways, market stalls, the uneven lines of old apartment buildings leaning toward one another. "You draw places people forget," he said before he realized he was speaking aloud. She looked up, studied him for a moment, then smiled. "Those are the most honest ones." That was how they started talking, not about careers or ambition, but about why certain places felt alive and others didn't. She told him she was an art student, trying to figure out whether talent mattered more than persistence. He told her about his startup, stumbling through an explanation that usually lost people halfway through. She didn't lose interest. She asked questions no investor ever had. Who would it help? Why did it matter? What would happen to the people who couldn't keep up? By the time the tea house closed, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. They walked together through narrow streets, shoes splashing through shallow puddles, conversation flowing as if they'd known each other far longer than a single afternoon. When Miho walked her home, he felt lighter than he had in months. Not successful, not confident, just understood. Their relationship grew quietly. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just a steady accumulation of shared moments. Late-night meals eaten on the floor of Miho's small apartment. John sketching while he worked beside her, laptop balanced on his knees. Conversations that stretched past midnight without either of them noticing the time. She believed in him before anyone else did. Not in the abstract way people say they believe in potential, but in the practical sense. She proofread his presentations, listened to him rehearse pitches that would later be rejected, reminded him to eat when he forgot. When his parents met her, they were polite but distant. An art student wasn't what they had imagined for their son. "She'll distract you," his mother warned. "This is not the time to divide your focus." Miho ignored her. For the first time in his life, he felt aligned. His ambition didn't feel like a burden. It felt shared. They married quietly. A small ceremony. A borrowed venue. No spectacle. They promised to grow together. For a while they did. John taught art classes to children during the day and worked on her own pieces at night. Miho worked relentlessly, chasing funding that always seemed just out of reach. Their apartment was small, cluttered with canvases and cables, but it felt alive. When Miho finally secured his first round of funding, he came home with a bottle of cheap champagne and lifted John off the floor. spinning her until they both laughed breathlessly. "This changes everything," he said. She smiled. "It's a beginning." Neither of them realized how differently they understood that word. As the company grew, Miho's days stretched longer. Meetings replaced meals. Calls replaced conversations. John adjusted without complaint, shifting her schedule to match his unpredictable hours. She stopped talking about her gallery plans, not because she had given them up, but because there never seemed to be space. Miho noticed none of it. He wasn't cruel. He didn't dismiss her outright. He simply assumed there would be time later. Later to slow down. Later to listen. Later to notice what she was quietly setting aside. From the outside, they still looked happy. From the inside, something delicate was beginning to thin. And neither of them yet understood the cost of believing that love could wait. The silence in the boutique returned the moment the conversation ended. Not awkward silence. Functional silence. The kind that allowed people to pretend nothing unusual had occurred. John moved first. She turned back to the rack and lifted another wedding gown, this one slimmer, less ornate. Her movements were smooth, practiced, entirely professional. If her hands trembled, they did not show it. "This one is closer to what you described," she said. "Clean lines. Structured. It photographs well without overpowering the wearer." Miho nodded, though his attention barely registered the dress. The room felt smaller now, denser. The past had not rushed in dramatically. It had settled quietly into the corners. From the desk behind the counter, the soft scratch of pencil against paper resumed. Sumin was drawing again. Miho found his eyes drawn to her without effort. She sat upright, feet not quite reaching the floor, sketchbook angled carefully. Her pencil moved in short, deliberate strokes. She paused often, studying the page before continuing, focus without urgency. He recognized immediately. "That's a nice habit," he said before he could stop himself. "Thinking before you move." Sumin looked up. Her eyes flicked briefly to her mother, then back to him. "Yama says mistakes are expensive if you rush," she replied. Miho felt something tighten in his chest. John did not turn around. She didn't ask for feedback. John said evenly, not sharp, just precise. "But thank you." Boundary restored. Miho nodded once. "Of course." He stepped back slightly, giving the appearance of space. John returned the gown to the rack and selected another, holding it up at arm's length. "This fabric is lighter," she continued. "Better for movement, less restrictive." The word lingered longer than it should have. Miho watched her face as she spoke, searching for cracks that weren't there. She had always been good at this, at containing emotion until it had nowhere else to go. "How long have you worked here?" he asked. 3 years, she replied without hesitation. "Design?" "Yes." "Lead designer." "Of course." She had always created beauty out of constraint. Sumin shifted in her seat. "Is this place where people get married clothes?" she asked. "Yes," John answered. Sumin considered that. "Do people come here happy?" The question landed lightly, but it stayed. "Most of them," John said after a brief pause. Sumin nodded, apparently satisfied. Miho glanced at the sketchbook again. He could see lines now, buildings, streets, intersections. The drawing wasn't decorative. It was structural. "What are you drawing?" he asked. Sumin hesitated, then turned the sketchbook toward him. "It's our street," she said. "That's our apartment. That's the shop downstairs. And that's where the bus always stops late." Miho studied the page. The proportions were precise. The spacing intentional. "You remembered all of that," he said quietly. She shrugged. "Patterns don't forget themselves." He felt the words settle somewhere uncomfortable. "How old are you?" he asked, already knowing. 7, she replied. The number clicked into place with brutal efficiency. Miho didn't react outwardly. Internally, something shifted, not relief, not panic, but a recalibration, a silent acknowledgement that life had continued to move forward while he had been looking elsewhere. John placed the gowns back into their protective covers. "Would you like to see accessories?" she asked. "Veils. Shoes." Miho shook his head slowly. "No," he said. I just needed to see the gowns. Of course. Sumin watched him closely. Is the dress for your wife? She asked again, her tone neutral, curious. For his fiancée, John corrected gently. Sumin frowned slightly. Why not your wife? Miho opened his mouth. Nothing came out. John turned to Sumin. That's enough questions. Sumin nodded, unbothered, and returned her drawing. Miho exhaled quietly. The boutique no longer felt like a place of beginning. It felt like a checkpoint, a place where timelines overlapped briefly before diverging again. He looked at John. You've built a good life, he said. It wasn't flattery. It was observation. John met his gaze steadily. Life builds itself when you keep showing up. The words were not an accusation. They were a fact. Miho glanced one last time at the gowns, then at the child bent over her sketchbook, completely absorbed in the world she was mapping. Time hadn't paused when he left. It had reorganized, quietly, thoroughly, without waiting for his permission. If you've ever assumed the world would stay open for you while you figured things out, remember this moment. The present doesn't hold its breath. It keeps going. Success did not arrive in Miho's life with ceremony. It arrived with an email. The subject line was short. Professional. Easy to overlook if you weren't already conditioned to scan for opportunity. Miho read it twice before the meeting settled. A venture firm wanted another meeting. Not a courtesy meeting. Not a polite dismissal disguised as interest. A real one. He read the message again, then again, pulse accelerating as possibility rearranged his priorities. He didn't tell John right away. Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't want to say it out loud until it was real. When he finally did, she smiled the way she always had when he brought her news like this. Not wide or exaggerated. Just steady. Believing. They wouldn't ask again if they weren't serious, she said. He nodded. That's what I thought. The meeting led to another, then funding. The first investment wasn't enormous, but it was enough. Enough to hire 3 employees. Enough to rent an office that wasn't someone's spare bedroom. Enough to stop explaining himself apologetically when he said the name of his company. Miho worked harder than he ever had. Longer days. Shorter nights. The kind of exhaustion that felt productive instead of draining. John adjusted her schedule to match his when she could, bringing dinner to the office, sketching quietly in the corner while he rehearsed presentations. They told each other this was temporary, just until the next milestone, just until the next round, just until things stabilized. When his company landed its first major client, Miho came home late, adrenaline still humming in his veins. John was asleep on the couch, sketchbook open on her chest, pencil fallen from her fingers. He didn't wake her. He stood there for a long moment, watching her breathe, feeling something close to gratitude, or relief, or both. The growth came quickly after that. Publications began calling. Industry blogs mentioned his name. Invitations arrived, panels, conferences, dinners he wasn't sure how to refuse. Each one felt important. Each one felt like a step forward. Miho learned to move faster. He ate between meetings, slept in increments, promised himself rest later. John noticed a change before he did. She noticed the way conversations shortened, how questions were answered while his eyes stayed on his phone, how weekends became catch-up time instead of rest. She didn't confront him. Instead, she adapted. She shifted her art classes, took on freelance work that paid more reliably, stopped waiting up for him when he said he'd be late, because late had stopped meaning anything specific. Miho told himself this was what progress looked like. When his parents began speaking proudly of him to their friends, when his mother stopped asking whether he was neglecting his real life, it felt like validation. He was finally becoming the man he was meant to be. And John seemed fine. She still smiled when he came home, still asked about his day, still listened. So he assumed everything was working. The company expanded to a second office, then a third. Miho hired executives who spoke his language, growth, scale, efficiency. Men and women who didn't flinch at 18-hour days or missed holidays, who understood that sacrifice was part of building something that mattered. The pace accelerated. Miho traveled constantly. Breakfast meetings replaced mornings at home. Dinner negotiations replaced evenings together. Time zones blurred. Sleep became optional. "I'll make it up to you," he told John one night over the phone, voice thick with exhaustion. "Just a few more weeks." She didn't argue. "Of course," she said. "Be careful." The absence wasn't dramatic. It didn't announce itself with slammed doors or raised voices. It accumulated. Missed dinners. Unshared moments. Questions answered later, until later stopped coming. John rearranged her expectations quietly. She stopped mentioning the gallery she once dreamed of opening. Her canvases stayed stacked against the wall, untouched, but she never pointed it out. When Miho did notice, months later, she shrugged. "I'm busy," she said. He accepted the explanation gratefully. The first time she asked him if he could take a weekend off, he laughed without meaning to. After the next release, he said, "I promise." She smiled. "You always say that." He didn't hear the weight beneath the words. The recognition arrived faster than he'd imagined. Awards, profiles, lists of innovators to watch. Miho learned to speak confidently about balance while living anything but. At events, John stood beside him, composed and elegant, answering polite questions about her work, deflecting curiosity about their private life. She learned to be invisible in rooms where his presence mattered more. Miho noticed distantly that she spoke less, but things were working. That was the metric that mattered. He believed, sincerely, that this was the hardest part, that once the foundation was set, everything else would fall into place. He believed success was a temporary inconvenience on the way to stability. One evening, long past midnight, Miho came home to find John sitting at the dining table, sketchbook closed, hands folded neatly in front of her. He paused in the doorway. "You're still up," he said. "I couldn't sleep," she replied. They sat together in silence. No argument followed. No accusation. Just space. Miho filled it the only way he knew how. "The Singapore opportunity is looking real," he said. "It's big. International expansion." She looked at him steadily. "How long?" 2 years, he said quickly. "Maybe less. And I'd be traveling constantly anyway. It wouldn't be that different." "Different?" She nodded once. "That's incredible," she said. He smiled, relieved. He didn't notice the way her hands tightened together. The truth, one neither of them said out loud, was that nothing felt urgent enough yet to demand change. Success was arriving fast. The cost was invisible. And absence, patient and quiet, continued to do its work. The first dinner Miho missed, John waited. She reheated the food once. Then again. By the third time, the rice had dried at the edges, and the soup had lost its warmth. She ate slowly, alone at the table, listening for the sound of keys at the door that never came. He texted close to midnight. "Running late. Don't wait up." She replied with a single word. "Okay." The second dinner he missed. She didn't wait. She ate earlier, washed the dishes, and left his plate in the refrigerator, not as a message, just as a precaution. The third time, she didn't cook at all. Miho noticed a change only in fragments. An empty stove, a quiet apartment, the absence of expectation. He assumed she was busy. She always was. "Just one more quarter," he said one evening as he loosened his tie, eyes already drifting to his phone. "Then things will calm down." She nodded. "You've said that before." He smiled, unbothered. "Because it's true." John didn't argue. That was how the fracture formed, not through confrontation, but through repetition. Miho's calendar filled with commitments that looked impressive from the outside. Investor dinners, product launches, conferences where his name appeared on banners. Each event came with an apology delivered in advance. "I'll make it up to you. After this push. Just until we stabilize." Language built entirely on postponement. John adapted quietly. She stopped marking dates on the calendar, stopped reminding him of events that mattered to her. When he missed her student exhibition, she didn't call. She didn't text. She thanked him for the flowers when he sent them and meant it. She learned how to carry disappointment without ceremony. At gatherings, she began attending alone. She smiled when people asked where Miho was, offered simple explanations. Work, travel, deadlines, words that required no follow-up. Miho told himself this meant understanding. He told himself she was strong, independent, that this was proof their relationship could withstand pressure. When his parents asked why she no longer came to family dinners, he answered easily, "She's busy." It sounded reasonable. One evening, John asked him to come home earlier, not for an event, not for an occasion, just to eat together. Miho agreed instinctively, then forgot. When he arrived close to midnight, the apartment was dark except for a single lamp by the table. John sat there, hands folded, posture composed. "You're late," she said. "I know," he replied, already defensive. Today was chaos. She nodded once. "That's what you said last week." He sighed, sitting across from her. "This is temporary. I need you to understand that." "I do understand," she said. "That's why I'm worried." He frowned. "About what?" "That temporary has become the permanent shape of our life." Miho leaned back, arms crossing. "You're exaggerating." She didn't react. "I don't need grand gestures," she continued calmly. "I need shared time that doesn't feel borrowed." "I'm building something," he said. "This isn't neglect. This is investment." "In what?" she asked. "Our future." She held his gaze. "I don't feel included in it." The words landed quietly. No accusation. Just truth. Miho shook his head. "You knew what you were signing up for." "I knew there would be sacrifice," she replied. "I didn't know I would stop being consulted." Silence followed. Not tense. Resolute. Miho softened his tone. "Just one more quarter. After that, I'll slow down. We'll travel. We'll breathe." She studied his face carefully, as if searching for something familiar. "You said that last quarter," she said. He didn't respond. That night, they lay in bed with space between them that felt intentional rather than incidental. Not punishment. Not anger. Adjustment. Over the following weeks, John stopped waiting for him to come home before sleeping. Stopped asking how long meetings would last. Stopped sharing small details about her day that once filled the space between them. Miho interpreted the quiet as peace. He didn't notice that she had begun living parallel to him instead of with him. The fracture widened through missed moments. An anniversary dinner rescheduled twice, then forgotten. A performance he promised to attend, then canceled hours before. A conversation that started with urgency and ended with exhaustion. When John finally spoke again, it wasn't during an argument. It was during breakfast. "I don't think you hear me anymore," she said, stirring her tea. Miho glanced up. "I'm right here." She smiled faintly. "That's not what I mean." He rubbed his temples. "I'm under a lot of pressure." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm telling you now, before it becomes resentment." He looked at her, genuinely confused. "What do you want me to do?" She considered the question. "Choose," she said. "Between what?" "Between postponing us and protecting us." He scoffed gently. "That's not fair." "Neither is waiting indefinitely," she replied. He stood, gathering his things. "I don't have time for this right now." She didn't stop him. The door closed softly behind him. Love didn't end that morning. It was deferred, again, and this time, neither of them pretended not to notice. If you've ever postponed connection because success felt urgent, ask yourself how many delays love can survive before it stops waiting. The boutique had shifted again. Not in layout, not in lighting, in gravity. Miho felt it as soon as he stepped back inside, an invisible narrowing, as if the room had decided how much space he was allowed to take. John stood behind the counter now, reviewing something on her tablet. Her posture was precise, economical, the kind of focus that came from years of needing to be efficient with limited time. Sumin sat on the stool beside her, legs tucked in, sketchbook closed. She looked up first. "You came back," she said. "Yes," Miho replied. She nodded, processing this as data rather than emotion. John glanced up. "We have about 15 minutes before my next appointment." Boundary. Time defined. Access measured. That's fine, Miho said quickly. I won't take long. Sumin watched him closely. Are you always in a hurry? She asked. The question wasn't accusatory, just curious. Miho hesitated. I guess I'm used to it. She tilted her head. My mom says being used to something doesn't mean it's good. John's eyes flicked to her daughter. Sumin, she said gently. I'm just asking, Sumin replied. Miho smiled faintly. She's observant. She always has been, John said, not proudly. Factually. Miho moved closer to the counter. He noticed details he hadn't before. The faint smudge of graphite on Sumin's fingers. The way John positioned herself slightly between them, without making it obvious. Protection without hostility. I wanted to ask about the gown, Miho said. John tapped the tablet once. It's on a 48-hour hold. 48, he repeated. Yes. When does that end? Tomorrow evening. The number settled into him slowly. A deadline that did not bend to negotiation. Sumin swung her legs gently. Is that the dress your new wife will wear? Yes, Miho said. She frowned slightly. Does she know you're here? John intervened smoothly. That's enough, Sumin. But Miho answered anyway. She does. Sumin studied his face. Does she wait for you? She asked. The question landed harder than any accusation could have. Miho felt a familiar tightening. The echo of kitchens gone cold. Conversations postponed. Promises framed as timelines. I don't know, he admitted. Sumin nodded once, as if that confirmed something she already suspected. My mom used to wait, she said. Not anymore. John closed the tablet. Sumin, go check the fabric samples in the back. Sumin slid off the stool, without protest. As she passed Miho, she paused. You don't look mean, she said quietly. Just busy. Then she was gone. The silence she left behind was heavier than before. Miho exhaled slowly. She's very perceptive. Yes, John said. That's why I'm careful about what I expose her to. I never meant. I know, she interrupted. Not sharply, firmly. Intent doesn't erase impact. He nodded, absorbing that. I didn't notice, he said. Back then. She met his gaze. That's also impact. Miho looked around the boutique. The clean lines, the order, the sense of something built patiently over time. You built a life, he said again. Yes, she replied. One that doesn't rely on waiting. He swallowed. Does she ask about me? John didn't answer immediately. She asks questions, she said finally. I answer what's appropriate. And what's appropriate? That you're someone who mattered, she said, and someone who chose differently. Miho felt the words settle, not as judgment, but as alignment. The clerk appeared quietly. Just a reminder, she said to John. The hold expires tomorrow at 6. John nodded. Thank you. Tomorrow. Miho realized something then, not with panic, but clarity. This wasn't about the gown. It was about time. Time he assumed would wait. Time that reorganized instead. He looked toward the back where Sumin had disappeared, then back at John. I didn't see what I was missing, he said. She regarded him steadily. Most people don't. Not until it has a name. He nodded once. As he turned to leave, Sumin's voice floated from the back. You should draw sometimes, she said. It makes you notice things. Miho paused. I'll remember that, he said. Whether he would, or could, remain uncertain. But the clock had started. And this time, it wasn't waiting for him. The promotion arrived on a Tuesday. Not ceremoniously, not dramatically. An email marked confidential, followed by a brief call from the board. The tone was congratulatory, efficient, already assuming acceptance. Expanded authority. Global oversight. Relocation required. 2 years minimum. Miho listened, asked the right questions, and said yes before the call ended. There was no hesitation. Only the familiar relief of momentum continuing uninterrupted. He told John that evening. She was at the kitchen counter, chopping vegetables, movement slow and deliberate. She didn't stop when he began speaking. She listened the way she had learned to, fully, without interruption. When he finished, the room stayed quiet. "How long?" she asked. 2 years, he said quickly. "Maybe less. With travel, it wouldn't feel that different." She set the knife down carefully. "There is no us anymore." The sentence landed without force. Miho blinked. "What?" She turned to face him. Calm, certain. "I'm not asking you to choose," she continued. "You already did." He laughed reflexively, disbelief rising before understanding. "That's not fair. We didn't even talk about this." She nodded. "Exactly." He stepped closer. "You're reacting to stress. We've been through harder things." She shook her head slowly. "We haven't been through this. This is permanence." Miho's voice softened. "I'm doing this for our future." She met his gaze. "I don't live in future tense anymore." Silence followed. Not brittle. Resolved. That night, John slept in the spare room. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Miho lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation as if it were a negotiation he could revisit. He told himself she needed time, that this was temporary resistance to change. In the morning, her side of the closet was half empty. He didn't notice at first. The packing happened quietly. John folded clothes with care, setting aside items she no longer wore. She packed books, sketch pads, old notebooks from before his company had a name. She left behind things she no longer needed to carry. Miho discovered the boxes by accident days later. "What's this?" he asked, gesturing toward the corner of the living room. "My things," she replied. He frowned. "You're moving?" "Yes." "When?" "This weekend." He ran a hand through his hair. "You didn't say anything." "I didn't want to interrupt," she said gently. The words struck deeper than accusation. They sat together at the table that evening. No shouting, no pleading, just logistics. The divorce was handled efficiently. They agreed on terms quickly. No lawyers circling. No need to weaponize memories. They divided what little they had accumulated before success complicated everything. Miho kept the apartment. John took the smaller account. It was fair. It was clean. He watched her sign the papers with steady hands. "Are you sure?" he asked one last time. She looked up. "I've been sure for a while." He swallowed. "You didn't say anything." "I did," she replied. "You just weren't available to hear it." That was the only moment his composure fractured, not into anger, into recognition. The day she left, there was no argument at the door. She carried one suitcase, one box of books, one framed sketch she'd never hung. Miho stood aside, holding the door open. At the threshold, she paused. "You were never cruel," she said. "That would have been easier." He looked at her, searching for something. Resentment, grief, permission. She offered none. "You were absent," she continued. "And absence doesn't argue. It just accumulates." He nodded once. "I hope you get everything you're working toward," she said. Then she left. No tears. No backward glance. The apartment felt larger after that. Not emptier, hollowed. Miho threw himself into work with renewed intensity. The move came quickly. New city, new office, new routines that left no room for reflection. The divorce finalized without ceremony. A document uploaded. A confirmation email. A chapter closed administratively. Years passed. Success multiplied. Miho became the man people expected him to be. But sometimes, late at night, in hotel rooms that all looked the same, he noticed the absence differently. Not as loneliness, but as something deferred too long to recover. If you believe love survives on intention alone, this is the part you miss. And if you think choosing later is still choosing, you already know how this ends. Miho stood in front of the mirror longer than necessary. Not to admire himself. He'd lost a habit years ago. But to delay the next step. The boutique was quiet behind him. The kind of quiet that followed decisions already made. The gown hung on its rack, protected by a clear cover, pristine and untouched. It looked the way commitments were supposed to look from the outside. Ordered, intentional, ready, and hollow. Miho turned away first. "I won't be taking it," he said. The words landed softly. John didn't respond right away. She studied his face, searching for cues she had learned long ago not to trust. "Is there a problem with the fit?" she asked. Professional tone. Neutral ground. "No," he said. "There's a problem with the transaction." She raised an eyebrow slightly. Not disbelief. Assessment. "This isn't about price," he added quickly. "I assumed that," she replied. He exhaled. "It feels wrong to carry something forward that doesn't belong to me." John's expression tightened, not in anger, but caution. "You don't need to explain yourself," she said. "This is a business." "That's just it," he replied. "It shouldn't be." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was alert. She folded her arms loosely. "If you're trying to rewrite something—" "I'm not," he interrupted gently. "I'm not asking for anything back." She held his gaze. "Then what are you asking for?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Permission to speak," he said. "Not to reclaim. Just acknowledge." John considered this. "I don't offer access lightly," she said, "especially when it affects my child." "I know," he replied. "That's why I'm asking, not assuming." Sumin's voice drifted from the back of the boutique. She was humming softly to herself, unaware of the negotiation happening without her. John glanced toward the sound, then back at Miho. "You don't get to disrupt her stability," she said calmly. "I wouldn't," he said. "I won't." The conviction in his voice surprised even him. Another pause. Then John spoke again. "There's a park near our apartment. Public. Open. Neutral. Controlled access. If you want to talk," she continued, "it will be there. Tomorrow. 30 minutes. Miho nodded. "That's more than I expected." "That's intentional," she replied. He reached into his pocket, then stopped himself before pulling anything out. "I don't need a receipt," he said. She inclined her head slightly. "No, you don't." As he turned to leave, Sumin appeared at the doorway. "You didn't buy it," she observed. "No," Miho said. She looked past him at the gown. "Why not?" He crouched slightly to meet her eye level, careful to keep distance. "Because some things shouldn't be taken just because you can," he said. She considered this, then nodded. "That makes sense," she said. "My mom says that too." John watched closely, but didn't intervene. Miho stood. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said to John. She nodded once. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter, clearer. Miho walked away without looking back, resisting the instinct to secure something tangible. The gown remained where it was, untouched, waiting for someone whose future aligned with it. For the first time in a long time, Miho didn't take what was available just because it was offered. He left something valuable behind. And that choice, quiet, uncelebrated, felt heavier than any acquisition he had ever made. If you've ever confused possession with progress, remember this moment. Growth isn't always about taking more. Sometimes it's about knowing when to walk away. The park was already busy when Miho arrived. Parents on benches, children moving in loose, unstructured orbits. The ordinary noise of life continuing without regard for private reckonings. He chose a bench near the path, not too close to the playground, not too far. Visible, accessible, contained. John arrived exactly on time. Sumin walked beside her, holding an ice cream cone with deliberate care, as if aware it could be taken away if mishandled. John carried nothing. No armor. No defensiveness. Just readiness. They sat, not together. Adjacent. Miho waited. He had learned, too late, that rushing only revealed impatience, not sincerity. Sumin broke the silence first. "You said 30 minutes, she said, glancing at her mother's watch. "That's not long." "No," Miho agreed. "It isn't." She nodded, satisfied by the honesty. John spoke next. "You wanted acknowledgement," she said. "You have it. Now say what you came to say." Miho exhaled slowly. "I know," he said, "that Sumin is my daughter." John didn't react. Sumin looked between them. That was fast. Miho met her eyes. "I should have known sooner." "But you didn't," Sumin said simply. "No," he replied. "I didn't." John folded her hands. You weren't told because you weren't present. And because I refuse to gamble her stability on the possibility you might become present later. Miho nodded. That was your right. Yes, she said. It was... He didn't argue. Did you ever think about telling me? He asked. Of course, John replied. Every time she learned something new. Every time she asked a question I couldn't fully answer. And every time I asked myself the same thing. What, he said, would this information benefit her or absolve you? The question sat between them. Miho didn't answer. Sumin licked her ice cream carefully. Mom says people can matter and still not be safe, she said. That's true, John replied. Miho felt the weight of that sentence settle permanently. I'm not here to undo anything, he said. I know I can't. John studied him. Then why are you here? He took his time. Because absence shouldn't be the last thing she knows of me, he said. And because presence, if allowed, should come with rules. John inclined her head slightly. Good, she said. Because there are rules. She didn't list them immediately. Instead, she spoke about Sumin. She thrives on routine, John said. Predictability. Follow through. She notices patterns faster than people realize and remembers them longer. Miho listened. She doesn't need explanations, John continued. She needs consistency, and she does not need disappointment disguised as good intentions. I understand, Miho said. No, John replied calmly. You don't. Not yet. She let the silence teach. My life didn't pause after you, she said. It reorganized. Miho nodded. I see that now. I finished my degree, John continued. Built this work. Built a home that doesn't wait on anyone's schedule. I didn't do that out of resentment. I did it because stability isn't optional when a child is involved. Sumin leaned against her mother's arm. Miho felt something unfamiliar. Not regret, not longing, but clarity. What do you need from me? He asked. John answered without hesitation. Reliability, she said. Not promises. Patterns. Sumin looked at him. Can you do boring things? He smiled faintly. I think so. Good, she said. Because exciting people disappear. That landed harder than anything else. John continued. If you're present, it will be limited. Scheduled. Public at first. No surprises. No emotional leverage. And if I fail? Miho asked. Then access ends, she said. Quietly. No threats. No anger. Just consequence. Miho nodded once. That's fair. Sumin studied him carefully. Do you have other kids? No, he said. Do you want more? She asked. He paused. I don't know. She accepted that. What do you do when you're not working? She asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I'm learning that, he said. She nodded. Okay. The 30 minutes ended without ceremony. John stood. This isn't forgiveness, she said. It's evaluation. I know, Miho replied. If you disappear again, she added, we will not repeat this conversation. I won't, he said. John didn't respond to that. As they walked away, Sumin turned once. You should come next Saturday, she said. There's a bench near the ducks. Same time. Miho didn't smile. He simply nodded. If you think accountability ends with truth, this is where you're wrong. Truth only opens the door. What happens next decides whether it stays open. The ice cream stand was nothing special. Plastic menu. Sticky counter. Flavors listed by color more than description. Miho stood beside Sumin while John waited a few steps back, watching, not intervening. You can choose, Miho said. Sumin considered every option carefully, as if testing them against an internal standard. Vanilla, she decided. It's honest. He ordered the same. They sat on the low wall near the path. Cones melting faster than expected. You work a lot, Sumin said. Yes, Miho replied. Why? He thought about market share, responsibility, legacy. Because I was afraid of stopping, he said instead. She nodded. Stopping helps you notice things. She gestured at a duck waddling past, completely unconcerned with schedules. Mio laughed quietly. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He felt it immediately. Didn't check it. Sumin noticed. "You're not answering," she said. "No," he replied. She watched him, then smiled faintly. "That's new." Mio powered the phone off. Not dramatically. Deliberately. John observed from a distance. Expression unreadable. When Sumin finished her cone, she wiped her hands carefully. "Will you come back?" she asked. "Yes," Mio said. "Not just say it," she clarified. "Actually come." "Yes," he repeated. She studied him, then nodded once. "That's good," she said. "I don't need more." They sat in silence. Not empty. Complete. Miho realized something then, not with relief, but acceptance. Wealth wasn't what he could provide. It was what he could sustain. Time. Attention. Presence without urgency. John approached. "Time," she said gently. Miho stood. "I'll see you next Saturday," he said. Sumin nodded. "Don't be late." "I won't." As they walked away, Miho stayed seated for a moment longer. The park continued around him. Life unpaused. For the first time, he didn't measure value in growth or scale. He measured it in what he was willing to protect. If you've ever wondered whether success can be redefined, not erased, but reshaped, this is a question that stays with you, and the answer isn't loud. It's what you choose to show up for when no one is watching.